Today is a good day. Today, the Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying tabled its report recommending that the Government of Canada amend the Criminal Code to indefinitely exclude persons whose sole underlying condition is a mental illness from eligibility for medical assistance in dying. Conservatives support the committee's recommendation that this expansion be paused indefinitely. This will save thousands of lives. And this is the position that Conservatives have taken from the beginning. In 2021, we voted against the Senate Amendment Bill C7 that created the sunset clause that set this dangerous expansion in motion. Since then, the Liberal government has been forced to delay the expansion twice through last-minute emergency legislation. The evidence is clear. It has always been. Moving forward with this expansion is reckless and dangerous. The two core problems remain unresolved. Clinicians cannot reliably determine when a mental illness is irremediable, and they cannot reliably distinguish a request for MAID from suicidality in this context. So that's why I introduced Bill C-218. This bill will amend the Criminal Code to permanently repeal the scheduled expansion of MAID where mental illness is the sole underlying medical condition. Time is of the essence. Bill C-218 has already begun the legislative process and is the clearest path forward to implement the committee's recommendation before the current sunset clause expires. This is a serious issue, and while we don't always agree, we were able to work collaboratively thus far with the government during the committee's study and listen carefully to the evidence before us. I hope that that spirit of collaboration continues. Vulnerable Canadians should not be caught in partisan games or legislative delay. There's no reason for government not to support Bill C-218 at second reading. Send it to committee and work with us to get this done as soon as possible. Now, some members have raised questions about the wording of the bill, specifically whether it should use mental disorder or mental illness. We understand that concern. The Criminal Code currently uses mental illness, while the term mental disorder has been used throughout much of the expert evidence and previous committee work. If the government wants the bill to use mental illness, we are happy to make that small amendment at committee. What matters is not using terminology or an easily resolvable technicality as an excuse to delay action. It would be an unfortunate display of cynical politics if the government introduced their own legislation that's coupled with other changes to the MAID regime. Over the course of the committee study, concerns were also raised about the effectiveness and enforceability of the current MAID safeguards. And that's why Conservatives are recommending stronger MAID monitoring and public reporting, minimal national standards for oversight, updated guidance and training, and a review of whether current MAID safeguards are protecting vulnerable Canadians. Canadians suffering from mental illness deserve care, protection, treatment, and hope. They shouldn't be offered MAID as a substitute for the supports governments have failed to provide. That's why our position is clear. The government must support Bill C-218 and indefinitely repeal this dangerous expansion. And now I'm going to let my colleague, Mr. Lawton, Mr. Cooper
yes,
first.
Michael Cooper, Member of Parliament for St. Albert, Sturgeon River. The report tabled moments ago in the House of Commons and signed on to by all Conservative and Liberal MPs of the Special Joint Committee on MAID validates what Conservatives have said from day one, that this expansion of MAID for mental illness should never have gone forward in the first place, and that the only responsible course of action for the government to take in the face of their decision to have moved ahead with this is to put an indefinite pause on the expansion. This is also a lesson of what happens when a government puts ideology ahead of evidence and facts. After all, it is this Liberal government that signed on to and endorsed a radical 11th-hour Senate amendment to Bill C-7 that set this train in motion. Had the Liberal government followed the evidence, followed the facts, engaged in meaningful consultation, they would have heard what our committee heard overwhelmingly from experts, including leading psychiatrists, and that is that MAID for mental illness cannot go forward because it is not safe. It is not safe because of two fundamental clinical issues. First, it is difficult, if not impossible, to predict irremediability. What that means is that persons who could get better, who could go on to lead healthy and happy lives, would have their lives prematurely ended with this expansion. And secondly, that it is difficult to distinguish a rational request for MAID versus one motivated by suicidal ideation when mental illness is the underlying condition. And that is underscored by the fact that in about 90% of suicides, mental illness is a factor. This Liberal government, as a result of not following the evidence and jumping ahead with the radical Senate amendment, ramming it through Parliament, has resulted in the government having to bring in 2 emergency bills to delay implementation. This is the third kick at the can, so to speak, for the Liberal government. And the underlying clinical issues are not going away. They're there, and until they can be resolved, and there's no evidence that they will be resolved anytime soon, MAID for mental illness cannot proceed safely. And so in the face of that, the only course for the government to take is to follow the recommendation of the committee, introduce legislation to put an indefinite pause on this expansion, and in that regard, there's a very clear path, and it's called Bill C-218.
Andrew Lawton, Member of Parliament for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. I am one of the millions of Canadians who has faced mental illness head-on and almost lost my life to a suicide attempt more than 15 years ago. And I and many others who wrote in, who've shared their stories, have said that if the expansion that is currently set to come in next year were there previously, I and these others might not be here today. This is a very important day that we had Liberal and Conservative members together endorsing one single recommendation, which was that this expansion should not proceed. And I cannot state clearly enough, and I cannot restate enough, that this will save lives. One thing that became abundantly clear in the testimony, especially from people who work with patients dealing with a range of mental illnesses, is that irremediability does not exist for mental illness to the extent that it does and in the same way that it does for physical illness. By that I mean psychiatrists have said that they have worked with patients that at one point in their lives felt they could never get better, could never heal, could never live a life in which they experience joy and peace and comfort, who then do that. We had healthcare workers talk about patients that have tried to multiple times over end their lives only to come out the other end and be so grateful they didn't. Recovery is so crucially important. It's why Bill C-218 from my colleague Ms. Jansen was titled the Right to Recover Act. It's crucial that people who are at their most vulnerable stage in life dealing with these severe mental illnesses are given the supports they need to not want to end their lives anymore. And I'm proud to stand with those people. I'm proud to say to all of those people that we heard you, and this is the very important culmination of what has been a years-long discussion that I don't think ever needed to happen in the first place, but I'm glad we're here, and I hope the government takes the very clear and direct path forward, which is to support Bill C-218. Thank you.
Ms. Jansen, have you had any meetings or conversations with the Justice Minister, or have you scheduled any, I suppose, now, pending this report?
Well, what I'm really hoping is that they will actually take a look at my bill now super close, rather than start thinking about doing something on their own. I think ours is ready to go. As soon as we get back in September, we can actually move it forward, get it into committee, and make sure that we don't miss the sunset clause.
I don't know if the question for Mr. Cooper is only because it's something you said I want to reference. You talk about, I know that you guys framed the current Liberal government as the same as the previous Liberal government, but there seems to be a distinction here with this report at this time, in that you have Liberal MPs now saying, no, stop. And you have, the Justice Minister, different than the prior Justice Minister, how he speaks about MAID as an issue. Do you think there is a change with this government about how it's thinking about MAID?
I can say that we worked collaboratively with Liberal members on the committee who recognized, as we did, that there needs to be an indefinite pause. It is now in the Liberal government's court. It's in the Justice Minister's hands, it's in the Health Minister's hands, and the appropriate course of action is to move forward with legislation to put an indefinite pause. They have not committed to doing that to date. They need to do so, and I would just reiterate there is a clear path, which is Ms. Jansen's Bill C-218, to do just that.
If I could just ask one more about, you referenced, is actually from Ms. Jansen, you referenced, I think, in reading the Conservatives' report, the need for a review of the Track 2.
No, we're just saying that we heard a lot of testimony that there are challenges in the system as it stands, and so then we think it's really wise to review how things are actually working at this time.
What do you think is best placed for that review? Would it be a special committee like the one that was just struck? Would it be a separate Justice Committee, Health Committee? What do you think?
Yeah, we're just looking for the government to actually ensure that we do a study, because the review is very necessary based on the testimony that we heard there.
Where do Conservatives stand on dealing with Track 2? Because disability advocates have been very loud that the eligibility should be withdrawn back to maybe what it initially was.
I hope you don't mind me saying that today actually is just a moment of pure joy that we got this far as we have. We're going to take a little moment to enjoy that, to celebrate the fact that we were collaboratively able to come to this great day, and let's continue this kind of collaborative work on the MAID situation.
What is your message to senators who have a different view? Some of them wrote a dissenting report, and you also said, Mr. Cooper, that this stemmed from the Senate. So I just wonder what your reflections are on the Senate itself and its role in all of this.
One thing that's crucially important here is that all members of the committee from all parties, including senators, had the opportunity to and did invite witnesses to testify. So we heard from a large cross-section of witnesses. It was very significant to all of us that we not limit the number of submissions we could receive from people who were not even witnesses before the committee. And we received dozens of briefs. We heard from experts in the mental health space. We heard from MAID advocates. We heard from people who are skeptical of MAID, in particular the expansion to mental illness. And we heard from people with lived experience. And at the end of the day, if this did in fact originate from the Senate, there may be a couple of senators that want to just preserve their own legacy on this, but ultimately the message that we got from the committee's work was very clear, and that's reflected in the report.
What do you think should be done for those people who are suffering from mental illness right now, who were hoping for this expansion to take effect next March?
Care.
We need to provide support and care. We need to provide people with the resources so they do not want to end their lives. And I'm so grateful that we have come to a conclusion that will not tell these people that we should be killing them, which is what would have happened. We're not giving up on them. We insist that everyone has a right to recover.
I have a question, just on a slightly different note. Do you plan to campaign for a United Canada in Alberta over the summer?
I support a stronger Alberta within a united Canada.
Are there any plans for any campaigns or any events?
I fully support the position taken by Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Cooper, you were on the committee a couple years ago, the last time it had a look at this. And unless I'm misremembering it, I remember at that time the committee's recommendation was a delay. It didn't get to the indefinite part of the delay. So I'm wondering, what do you think has changed from that committee to this one to kind of get that wording of let's just not do this altogether?
Well, how many times can the government possibly introduce 11th hour legislation to delay? When the issues are the same. They were the same in 2022 when the special committee convened. They were the same in 24, and they were the same over the course of this committee's mandate. And those issues are clear. They're fundamental clinical issues that will result in vulnerable persons who could get better, who could have their lives prematurely ended. We heard evidence that predicting irremediability is less accurate than 50% of the time getting it right. In other words, you'd be better off flipping a coin. To proceed with this would be completely reckless and it would be completely dangerous. It's the path this Liberal government set us on back in 2021. They have an opportunity to finally follow the evidence and do what we have called on the Liberals to do from day one, and that is to put an indefinite pause on this expansion.
Mr. Doherty, I actually wondered if we could just hear from you, because it's your advocacy that led to 988 as the mental health and suicide hotline, and I wonder what your perspective is on what happened today and whether you view there are enough resources right now for mental health, how you feel 988 might be a factor here and be helpful to people.
Well, first off, I want to congratulate my colleagues. I was slated as a member for the for the committee. I followed it along the way as I recovered from surgery, but I couldn't be more proud of my colleagues here, but all colleagues that were on that committee came up with the right decision. It's something that we pushed for since 2021, as you would know. And if you followed my career as being an elected official, I believe that you have to always give hope. And we have to knock down the barriers for those that are trying to get help. We have to break the stigma. We have to have these conversations so that people feel comfortable enough to come forward to say that they're hurting. You know, my colleague, MP Lawton, just said that if MAID was offered, if this was offered when he was struggling, that he likely wouldn't be here. I've shared my own personal stories. You know, I don't know whether I would be here. And we hear these stories time and time again. I think we should always be fighting for Canadians, always give them the best course of action so that they can recover, so that they can lead healthy lives. I don't think there's enough in, you know, mental health dollars versus physical health dollars, it's pennies on the dollar. So we have to do more. Until we start seeing mental health in parity with physical health, we're going to continue down the path of seeing more and more Canadians that are struggling. Today is a great news story. It's a great story. We're giving those that are struggling with mental health the hope that they don't have to go down this path. You know, we've heard stories about veterans that have called up seeking help for their mental health, only to be offered to or suggested, have you considered MAID? Absolutely horrible. That should be taken out of the equation at any time. So today is a great news story, and I'm here more in support of my colleagues, and I couldn't be more prouder for them.
I guess, Ms. Jansen, I'm remembering a version of a bill that former MP Ed Fast had put forward that I think was similar.
It's the same.
It's the same. And it had at that time garnered some Liberal MPs voting with the Conservatives to get it to second reading. I'm curious, have you spoken to Liberal MPs about supporting your bill, and what do you think the level of support is within that Liberal caucus?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much to MP Ed Fast, good friend. I'm very thankful that he did push this forward, and that he brought this issue forward nice and early, so we could really start pushing on the issue. And of course, we've been out there talking to our Liberal colleagues, and as you can see, we've achieved a great thing today. So I'm very, very thankful. The work has really come full circle. Thank you.
One last question.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.